Good evening, everybody. It's coming up to time, immaculate timing, Councillor Phillimore. If we're all ready, we'll go live and start our meeting. Is that okay? We're all ready? So welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for coming this evening to our first face-to-face meeting of CEP this year. It's really good to see everybody. We've got a very interesting agenda this evening, and I'm hoping to steer us through to before 9:30 if possible, but certainly not past 9:30. So I would be very grateful if you'd help me with that along the way. So to start off with, we have the usual fire evacuation procedures. So there are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear and side of this room. Exit through reception and meet in the War Memorial Park. Please note that this meeting is being webcast live on the internet. The webcast will also be published to YouTube after the meeting. And finally, please can all members and the public switch off their phones or turn to silent. Thank you very much. So, first of all, apologies for absence and substitution. So I have apologies from Councillors Mahaffey, Court, McKay and Follett-Maitland. I have substitutes are Councillors Gaskell for Councillor Mahaffey, Councillor Jeans for Councillor Court, Councillor Bowles for Councillor McKay and Councillor Phillimore for Councillor Follett-Maitland. So thank you very much for coming, everybody. So the second item is, do we have any declarations of interest this evening? No, everybody comfortable, thank you. And I have no urgent matters, nothing else come up? No, thank you very much. So item 4, the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of July. This is for matters of accuracy only. Has anyone anything they wish to raise? So is everyone content that was at the last meeting that I signed these minutes as a true record? Yes, thank you very much. Item 5 is place shaping board. I think this is a really interesting topic, and I think we should have some very really interesting, stimulating discussions. I'd like to keep it to around about 30 minutes. So just so you know, that's what my clock is going to be looking at. Daniel Garnier is here to support us as the officer. He's the Economy and Culture Manager. Thank you for coming, Daniel. Thank you for your paper. And Councillor Rattigan is here to introduce this paper and this topic. Thank you very much, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of this committee. It is important that we realise that times are changing and the story of Basingstoke is evolving. What was once a small, quaint market town has obviously changed irreparably, and we can see that we need to change in how we bring forward a new, vibrant Basingstoke. But we need to realise that we are only part of the story. No organisation can do everything, but all organisations can do something. And I think it is in that spirit of partnership that we need to formulate a new placemaking board that we can rely on to help us in shaping not just the future that we will see out, but the future that this town and its residents, even those yet to be born, will benefit from. It is important that we are honest with ourselves. This town, this borough, has challenges that we might know in the back of our mind, but are not always voiced, because the reality is it's a lovely place to live. We are financially secure as a borough. We don't always talk about the areas of deprivation within where we live, and the areas where we are not getting the traction that we need to help those who can't help themselves or are scared to bring forward problems because they don't want to be a burden. It's a line I hear often, quite often, but from the most elderly in our society, that, oh, I don't want to be a burden, I'm sorry I've come out. I see people in my job when I go across the road, they're knocking at the door of reception and say, oh, don't worry, I don't want to be a burden. I said, well, there's the phone, I'll try and solve it. And I think it's trying to solve problems that is one of our key features of us as a borough council. But as I've said, we can't do this, A, in isolation, but B, not be mindful of the changes that have come about since the BAS board was commissioned more than a dozen years ago. It is, in my view, a perfectly great time to be doing this. We have a chance during this economic recovery piece where people are both inwardly and outwardly reviewing where they are, what they do, and how they do it. And I think genuinely that a spirit of partnership, not just held by us as the administration, but by you as the councillors, as representatives of people who live and work here, we need to understand, A, what they want, what you want as the elected officials for that, and to see how we can weave those in to the new tapestry that will be our town as we move forward. It is important to me that we use the best of the skill sets that are available. We have a thriving town, over 7,500 businesses within this town and this borough. We've got great expertise in lots of fields. We've got lots of things that we should be hugely proud of. The arts, our health world, our town itself. We've got some great areas that we have shaped, people before us have shaped, to be good places to live. So as people can have a garden, they can have the open space that is the War Memorial Park, that we shape them for their future. So what I'm asking from you is that your views as a committee of this council on how I establish a place shaping board and what role it will have in bringing forward a better borough. And I think genuinely that is the task at hand. We've given you, in the papers that Daniel's prepared for you, some thoughts of who we've had in the past, and we've given you some thoughts of who we might use in the future. But there is nothing off this agenda, and no one is excluded. That is the poorest, the wealthiest. People who care about this borough do not have to have wealth, they just have to have ambition. And I'm looking for people who will be in that place shaping board, who will have the ambition that we all have, to make this a better borough. So I will listen to your discussions tonight, and the words that you speak, I promise, will be reflected in who we bring forward to tell that story of a better Basingstoke for the future. That is my initial presentation, but I will answer any questions on anything that you have, because I value all of you.
Thank you, Councillor Rattigan. Daniel, did you wish to speak too? Thank you.
Absolutely. Good evening, councillors. So, following on from Councillor Rattigan's introduction, the paper kind of outlines the proposed approach to kind of partnership working moving forward. And as you all know, we've had the Basingstoke Area 2 Partnership BAS for quite a few years. It brings together members of different sectors, both from public, private and community sectors. We are looking at the moment kind of how we can refocus and reshape that partnership, and also looking, as Councillor Rattigan mentioned, at establishing a place shaping board. We are in a different sort of time at the moment. The council and our partners have got kind of key changing priorities, and we're kind of very focused on delivering some major projects. And it's important, I think, that we've got the right partnership and with the right membership at the right level to help us support that delivery of projects, while still being able kind of to engage with the wider community and the wider representation locally. So the idea, I think, is to set up a place shaping board that will bring together key decision makers and delivery partners with a key focus on delivery, and at the same time kind of review our working arrangement with BASP and kind of look at how the partnership functions and what its purpose and what might be in the future. you probably ask, what should we have to partnerships? And from my perspective is that BASP is very much a way to engage people, a forum for people to share their views, to discuss matters, but it's not really kind of delivery or action focused. It doesn't always bring the right level or the right type of organizations. And I think as part of this process, we've been engaging BASP board members kind of to gather their views. And I think recognition was they all value the membership. They find it useful as an information sharing platform, but they also recognize that the partnership is not action-led or doesn't have any accountability. And I think they feel that, their role would be to be part of that play-shaping board, but to represent more the community and social kind of matters and community and social views. So at the moment, I think, very much work in progress. I think, kind of starting the process. Tonight, very much want to hear your views, I think, on these proposals, and I think, how these partnerships could be shaped moving forward. There are kind of two appendices, one that gives you an overview of BASP now, and the other one kind of an initial kind of proposal, like kind of what the play-shaping board could like. But as Councillor Rattigan said, I think nothing is set in stone, and very much kind of engage you as councillors, but also carry on engaging with BASP board members as we move forward, kind of to reshape this partnership. And I don't think I want to say much more than that, and we kind of very much open the to cash questions and discussions.
Thank you very much, Daniel. So to remind the committee, what we're being asked for are our views on the establishment of a place-shaping board, its role and its proposed membership, and then the options for the role and future of the Basingstoke Area Strategic Partnership. So if we could, it would be helpful if we could initially look for any questions of clarification about the paper and, if you like, the facts of it would be quite helpful to clear away before we move to talking about comment and opinion and views. So did anybody have any questions about the paper? I thought it was a really well-written, clear paper. So I wasn't sure if people would have any. Yes, Councillor Tustain.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that I was just wondering about is how open to the public is this place changing board? I actually really like the idea of the fact that there are to be measured outcomes, which obviously isn't in the current thing, because that to me is, if you're having a committee of any sort, if you can't actually have results from it, then that's obviously a waste of a lot of people's time. So that's welcomed. But the issue is how would that then interact? So is this open to, is the information get publicised? Is that the general idea? And also, sorry, and just to say that, and said, how could, if people wanted to feed into that, because obviously we're looking at how the whole town centre redevelopment is saying we're calling on the public. So is there sort of a two-way path of communication and open information?
Thank you.
I think there will be a requirement to have very open and frank discussions of what's wrong with the town, the borough, initially. I'm quite happy to accept that there will be a requirement for the public to understand what we are doing and why we are doing it. But there will have to be a level, I'm not going to use the word secrecy, but there has to be a level of openness that could not perhaps come about if every word that was minuted down. But I do think we need, if we have the place shaping board, to write a commentary, which I think would be publicly available, and to discuss in the high level terms of what we've come out with and what thoughts we've got moving forward. But I do feel an opportunity to be frank, because there are things that are wrong with this borough, and we want people to be honest about them. That might not be possible if they are criticising other partners or people within the borough, and I don't think that's really what I would want. But I'm happy to provide a end of meeting commentary and summary of what has been discussed. And of course, we will be open at times to the public coming in and giving us their views on how we make this borough better.
Thank you. Is that okay, Councillor Tustain? Yeah. Councillor Bowes, I think you wanted to ask a question. Thank you.
I was just looking at the options, the do nothing, the set up a place shaping board, maintain BASP in the current format, etc. But the one that wasn't there was what about reforming BASP from within, rather than setting up another board over the top of it with another layer of bureaucracy? And do we have any guarantees that the place shaping board won't go the same way that it said that BASP has gone?
Thank you, Councillor Bose. Good question. Yeah, she has.
Obviously, we will be focusing on it not being a talkie shop, but a delivery vehicle. And I think because we're going to have measurable outcomes, as has already been pointed out, I think you can be assured it will not be a replica of the same thing, and therefore you can think, yes, I can see the journey they are taking to get those outcomes.
Is that okay, Councillor Bose? Yeah. Councillor Wooldridge?
Thank you, Chair. I would firstly like to say I like the idea of having it accountable and outcome driven, so that, yeah, I'll make that comment later, but if you want it in the comment section. But so I agree with what you're trying to do. I suppose my concern, and this is where you may be able to clarify it, is if you're having really high level people making decisions and being accountable, I suppose I'd have liked to have seen how they're going to be able to make those decisions, what the process is to be able, for them to be able to make those decisions, because not somebody high level might not be able to make a decision on something they haven't got the expertise to know anything about, like Hampshire County Council, that's split into highways, social care, as we know, and all these different very wide ranging departments. And if you've got somebody there very high level, they might not have the expertise to be able to make that decision there and there in that meeting. So, and the fact so are we going to have various members, various officers of Hampshire County Council who can come into each meeting depending what the topics are, and likewise housing association, are we going to have, you know, sort of 3 or 4 housing associations represented? So if it's to do more with, say, regeneration in Winklebury, it might be Vivid, who's the most relevant people here, but if it's one, you know, another one, it might be Sovereign. So I suppose I would have liked to see more of the detail about how this decision making is going to happen, to be able to really comment on whether I think it's a good idea. In principle, I do think it's a good idea, but at the moment I'm really confused about how it's all going to work, if that helps.
Thanks, Councillor Wooldridge.
Thank you, Councillor Wooldridge. As always, you've hit to the nub. I think the membership will be fluid, and I think that is one of the things that will make it dynamic, the ability to swap in and out members as we see fit for the things that we are proposing going forward. Now, obviously, we're talking about regeneration. Housing associations are absolutely important in there, but also the highways issues that might click alongside that. We would need to have our housing team, low carbon group. You know, these will be all important for the specifics that we will be talking about. And one of the things that we will need to do when we form this is to make sure that the agendas match the drive and impetus and the immediacy of an issue. So, for example, a regen piece needs to be handled carefully, not just with our planning colleagues, but obviously with money, highways, the implementators of that. So there will be a fluid way, and we won't always have the same people there, but we will choose the expertise that we need. And of course, once we've got people in, the majority of these people will have life experiences, much like the table around here. You've all got life experiences which will be able to add in, even if they are not specific to the topic that we are discussing. Your ability, their ability to understand how that's worked in their previous roles will aid us in it. So it might be about money, it might be about the people. If it's about health, it's about the access to health. As I know one of my councillors across the table, she's passionate about, it's making sure that we drive the things that are A, of interest, but B, will make this a better borough. So I give you the promise that as we're not yet setting agendas or setting the scope of it, it's just the outline of your support and maybe your thoughts on membership and things like that, and maybe some of the topics that you'd like us to think about, then I'd be easy enough to say to you, come and see what we're doing. And that obviously the first meeting can be open to members, at least then, certainly of this committee, so as you know what you're trying to shape and what you were trying to achieve by your discussions tonight.
Councillor Wood, is that okay? Okay, thank you. Could you press your, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
One further question, and I don't know whether, I'm going back to the accountability sort of public sort of thing that we were talking about earlier. Given that we want people there making decisions and being accountable, even if we're not going to sort of minute the meetings, which I understand in key decision making you can't always do that, would it be possible to for the public to be aware that the meetings are happening and who actually attended the meetings, so that at least people are accountable in terms of whether they're present or absent? That might be a way forward. Just your thoughts on that, I suppose.
I would encourage that the public know what we are doing. I have no issues with it. I just want open and frank discussions while we're in there, and we can provide the commentary so as people are aware of it. I have no problems about dates. I obviously already hold the Economic Recovery Board, at which people are very frank about what they think would improve this town. We don't provide minutes for that, but it is an open discussion on which some of my views and some of the views that will be reflected in policy within this town will be pushed back to you as the councillors, but also to the wider public. And I make it, and it will be completely transparent in the sense that we will give you what is enough to know what we are doing. And of course, the accountability, nobody will be getting paid for this. So they will, the accountability of the public purse will not be strained. And I think genuinely the involvement of the people we are likely to get on board will mean that we are getting value with every meeting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rattigan. One last question for clarity, Councillor Gasco, then we'll move on to debate.
Thank you, Chair. Just an observation, really. On page 17, Appendix 1, there's a table there. It mentions health and well-being, but I don't see any sports organisations or leisure organisations. On the wording, it says that the last meeting was focused on climate change. I don't see any environment groups. Maybe we could
I think
consider
there is
that.
an environment group.
Low carbon.
Yeah,
Okay.
low carbon energy group is there, Councillor Gasco. I don't know about the sports.
And the other observation was you've got the Federation of Small Businesses, but no large businesses.
Thank you.
Oh, we are blessed with the BASP membership at the moment, and you've highlighted that's BASP. BASP, as I've already alluded to, will need to change. So what we are saying is BASP will change, and some of the things you've highlighted, sports, well-being, aren't in there. But of course, the climate change agenda is a green thread through everything we do. If you move to the Appendix 2 on 21, we can add in there, now we've obviously got a low carbon group, we've got Homes England, we've got representatives of Hampshire Hospitals, which is the well-being piece, which sports is important, and don't get me wrong, as a great supporter of Glasgow Celtic, I accept that, but we need to understand sports and well-being are almost intertwined, and I think if we can get on board good outcomes through health, I think sports will be added to it. But I accept that maybe we have to think about the breadth a little bit more, and that's what the debate is tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Sorry, Daniel.
In terms of the BASP membership, the BASP board brings together all the party action groups. So the Health and Wellbeing Partnership, as part of that, you have got kind of a sports representation. But I think, on the BAS board, basically, you only get kind of one representative for each of the participation groups. So, every sector is kind of represented. But at board level, it's very much kind of just one person representing the action groups.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. So if we could move to debate, and so this is actually, could we have our views? Now we've had the paper and some clarification questions, which have been very good because they have picked out some of our views actually just merely in the questions, which were very good. So have we any other opinions and views from committee members about both the establishment of the board, its role and proposed membership, and the options for the BASP itself? Councillor Ganesh.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a great idea to work with partners, more collaborative, to achieve our goals as a borough. I think my question, or sort of I would like to emphasize the fact that we need to have more expertise in terms of the Hampshire County Council's representatives, because this was mentioned previously that various directorates within the Hampshire County Council and their remit and the amount of influence they can have in the borough is significant, and their influence is very high. So we need to have, or maybe we should probably think more around sort of a rotating membership within directorates within Hampshire County Council, if that's something that you can consider for future. And can we also have a sort of a set of pool that you can pick for future to add on to this, or if there is any sort of for lack of expertise in particular area, can we bring another organisation into this on particular area of expertise when you discuss on things that matters to those particular organisations? Thank you,
Councillor Ganesh.
In answer to that, and thank you for those questions, obviously Hampshire is huge, monolithic. So it goes from adult social care to childcare and everything in between. So they will be, as I alluded to initially, the membership will be fluid to get the best advantage out of everybody who is in that partnership. And I very much look forward to changing it as we change agendas for that. And obviously the individual at your right hand side will maybe have something to say about how Hampshire County Council works. But I don't see there being an issue in us bringing forward the right expertise at the right time to provide us with the right answers and the way forward. So I look forward to that.
Thank you, Councillor Rattigan. Yes, Councillor Fillmore.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The membership of the board seems to be very high level, and I would just support the sentence that says representatives from other local partnership organisations or partnerships will be invited to join the board, because I think that's very important that we use our parochial sense, because certainly in terms of low carbon, why does an architect know more or want to cascade more down to sustainable Overton, Basingstoke Transition Network, etc., etc. All those people have got to be drawn into that particular one. The same as Federation of Small Businesses. We've got to engage with we're called local centres, so we've got to engage with Overton Business Association, Whitchurch, Kingsclear, all these centres, and Tadley. We've got to engage with all them. And the last point being that is the Proteus Theatre the biggest cultural sector we've got when we've got the Anvil and the Haymarket?
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. I mean, I accept that this very short list does not include all of the people who will have a direct say in our borough. And I think, there wouldn't be a list long enough to include everybody who could add value. But this is as it says, the first word is a draft list. Now, today's discussion has certainly made me think about, the outlying areas, the rural areas, the rural economy. I think that is in the place shaping that we need to bring forward. There is no doubt that parish councils have a direct say directly either to us or directly to the council about what they think we're doing right and what we're doing wrong and what we could do to change that. So yes, I think there will be a reshaping of this draft list, but I do think although it looks very high level, maybe some of the individuals who come will be the ones who've got the great ideas, the ones who will be spurred on to be the catalyst of change, because some of the younger members of our society have got some of the greatest ideas, and we do need to encompass some of that, and perhaps an inclusion from the school sector, that education sector, where they are picking up some of those new ideas, some of that greenness that our school pupils and the younger members of our society and our colleges have already got ingrained into them, and are not as crusty as old and as me or many others. So I hope that this discussion, and we're putting down notes, will allow us to access some of that help. And I absolutely get it on the carbon issues and the greenness issues, and I think there is much we can do on that. And I think with COP in Glasgow coming out in the next week or so, some of those ideas will already be percolating to many of the society members of society in Basingstoke and Dean.
Thank you. Councillor Testone?
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at this and I think it's quite interesting. In general, as I say, I think it's a great idea. But what we're looking at is something that seems to focus on, and obviously people are kind of stumbling over the idea of the specific membership. I wonder whether it's actually better to look at this. This is a strategic board, and we're looking at something that is at a high level, and it is only talking about meeting 4 times a year. So we are talking about what it's all about. And this is about shaping Basingstoke going forward. What is place? And should this actually reflect more saying place is about health, it's about well-being, and actually those top levels should in actual fact be topic focused, and then you have your representation underneath that. So it's more like an organisational hierarchy. I know that makes it more vague and more difficult to get people, but that then gives flexibility to pull in the relevant people at the relevant times. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Councillor Testone.
Yeah, absolutely does make sense to me. The work of this board will be based upon the agendas that we set. So if it is about health inequality, if it's about access to jobs and education, then we will obviously bring in the right people to aid those discussions. I don't see that being an issue, and having a board membership as high level as this doesn't mean that we are set with this. The discussions will be based upon the agenda that we set, and as I've already alluded to, I'm happy to give you the agenda so as you are aware of it, that public notice of what we are doing and what we are going to be discussing, and the visiting speakers, if that's what we choose to do, rather than just have a round table amongst ourselves. So we will be bringing in expertise, but it will be based upon the agenda that we think will place shape the best, the quickest, and with the most impact as we go through the meetings.
Thank you. Councillor Mammalani? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, fundamentally I accept this one and I welcome this one, and I'm happy to see the chair as a BCOT chairman, Anthony Bravo, but at the same time being a BME member himself, I would like to see more BME organizations such as CDCs and BMF probably, because our council, our borough constitution now is initial figures from the census suggest around 18 to 20%. So would like to have similar kind of representation in this entire board.
Thank you.
I have not seen in this. Oh, sorry. Okay.
That's the BAS membership.
Okay. Let's deal with that. The BAS membership. I read it and I can't tell the colour of anybody on that list, so I have no idea. The reality is, people will be brought on board for the quality of their advice and the direction of travel for them, and the enthusiasm they will bring to both organisations, both BASP and this new place shaping board. It won't be based upon colour, creed, anything, sexual orientation or anything. We will choose the best people for the agendas at hand, and BASP has been wonderfully chaired by Anthony Bravo so far, but reading the notes, you wouldn't know it, he was of any colour. So I'm just making the point that we will be open and diverse, and as you already know, I've set up an equalities, diversity and inclusion forum within this council to make sure that everybody, regardless of anything, any disadvantages they may perceive they have, get the opportunity to move their agendas forward in any way they want. So I can't tell you who will be members of these boards, but I can absolutely tell you they will be the best people all times. And of course, it's right that you say, how are we going to deal with that? Well, I promise you, we will make sure that diversity is included in that membership, not just because it will be better for the population that we look after, but of course, people need to feel that they are part of something. You only add to the value of something if you feel you're included in it. So I have no problems with the suggestion, but I can't tell you at this time who's going to be members of these boards and who will be included. But I can tell you we'll be open to everybody.
So could I ask a quick question to Daniel? I see on the Place Shaping Board membership that it has member organisations, includes the Cultural Compact representative. Could you just explain what the Cultural Compact is? Thank you.
Work in progress again. We're kind of
Okay.
looking at how we can bring together a range. I mean, at the moment, the way we look at culture is very much kind of engaging with cultural organisations.
Yeah.
The idea is to broaden that and kind of bring together kind of a group of partners, from kind of health sector, from education, kind of to make sure that when we look at culture, we look at culture as a conduit of delivering against our kind of priorities and agenda, and not just be focused on the actual culture itself, if you see what I mean. So as part of our cultural strategy, which kind of we are refreshing at the moment, we very much want to look at the role arts and culture in supporting well-being, in supporting quality of life, in supporting kind of how we promote our borough, supporting, I think, education and skills development. So the idea of the compact is kind of to try to bring all those voices together so that the cultural sector itself can be influenced by what other people think, and also kind of start collaboration across sectors, kind of move away from just, culture for culture, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
And a bit more kind of the broader impact and benefits of culture.
So I would like to think that we're thinking about culture in here, not just about art.
Absolutely.
But we're talking about culture of our society and our communities. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Is that okay, Councillor Mamaloni? Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor Compton-Burnett.
Thank you. I first wanted to say I think this is brilliant. I think it's really exciting and builds on a lot of work that I think's already been done. And one of the things I wanted to mention was the place shaping work that's already been taking place at the hospital, where they're working with Hampshire County Council, Basingstoke and Dean, the Hospital Trust and the CCG and voluntary and community sector on their own place shaping work, because obviously they have to do it with planning for the new hospital. So I think one of these one of these subgroups could actually be that place shaping group that has already been formed. Otherwise it'd be quite easy to get duplication and gaps. And the other thing I wanted quickly to mention was it would be helpful to have, I think, a voluntary sector contributor on the board, possibly from BVA.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett.
I'm happy to accept both of those ideas. Their value. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wooldridge, a short one if you don't mind. We're kind of running out of time.
I will keep it short. In addition to what I said, praising the idea behind it earlier, I'd just like to say that I think what is possibly missing from membership is a post-16 education. I know we've got it on the BASP at the moment, but I would think with the sort of 16 to 18-year-old education, whether it be BCOT or Queen Mary's College, is vitally important in terms of training our young people trends of young people in that age group, because they are our future. And as you said earlier, you want to listen to what that they have to say, because they've often got the best ideas, and they want to, that we want to hear what they want for the town in the future as well. So to have somebody at a high level, one of their principals, as a standing board member, for me, I think that would be important. Thanks.
Councillor Woodgett, I'm happy to say that you know, with a BASP representative, hopefully that would come about. But I accept that both Queen Mary's College and BCOP have a important role within our society, especially with apprenticeships being more important, that retraining, that reskilling of the us older section of society. We might have to change jobs in a post-pandemic world, so I totally accept that that's fine. And the idea of having a principal, how can I refuse that?
Councillor Ganesh, last question.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it short. I'm pleased to see the equalities and being inclusive being discussed, and I'm happy with what you've proposed. And I'm sure the CCGs and the Housing Association will have the right idea to represent and being inclusive, but aren't we looking into detail around the disability forums, or should we consider, or should we need to look into be more inclusive around how can we help disabled or any sort of the areas that we need to be as a borough or a council responsible for. Thank you.
Thank you.
With such a large portion of our population disabled, and some is visible and some of it is not, and we do need to take that on board. When we place shape, and some of the work we will do in the town, it needs to be accessible. It needs to be, for the visually impaired, it needs to be easy to get round and make your way through walkways that are not narrow and tight and restrictive. So I accept that we need to be place shape for everybody. And of course, for our disabled communities, that is will be hugely important.
Thank you. I'll just give my personal opinion before I close this particular part of the agenda, and that is, I think it would be very, very important for the success of the Place Shaping Board, from my perspective, is that whatever it decides to put on its agenda must be meaningful to each of the partners that are there. Because the hint that I get that the BASP may not have worked as well in recent years is that people come to meetings where they think it's going to help them with delivery of their own agendas in their own organisations. That's what motivates them and incentivises them to come and to make things happen. So I think finding topics and areas where each of the participatory areas really think they can make a difference and can, when they go back to their own organisations, really push through delivery. I think that's what will make it successful. A good networking is not, which is what BASP has turned out, is great, but in itself it doesn't necessarily deliver a huge amount. So I wish it good luck with finding the right things to take on. So to conclude this, I think it's been a really interesting debate. I hope you've taken away some very interesting points that members have raised. I think things about performance, accountability, we've had good opinions about membership, being inclusive, young people, the cultural offer. And I think it is about, we can see it could make things happen. It's about getting that energy into it. And I think we all feel that it has potential, a huge potential, so we wish you best of luck, and hopefully you can bring back in the future when you've got things a little bit more crystallised and moving along. I think we've had less comments on the future of BASP. I think that's probably because most of us are more interested in what's happening with the new things rather than what should happen there, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with BASP. Yes, certainly.
Obviously I can't think and write at the same time, so officers next to me have managed to articulate something. We agree that the agenda must be meaningful to the members, and members must be meaningful to the agenda. So we will make that the catch line, the strap line of what we do in this, and we'll be happy to come back to your committee to report on the work that was going forward, but also the membership, to give you some surety that we are lining up with the comments that have been made this evening. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So now, thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you. So now we will move to the annual climate change and air quality strategy update. So this is an annual update, which I'm sure, just like me, everybody's been very excited to receive this. It's been such an important aspect of our borough's work. And we adopted the climate change and air quality strategy at Council in March 2021 this year. And we are asked to note the contents of this report and appendices, including the actions underway and those proposed. Obviously, I think in doing that, I'm sure the folk come here today would value any comments that we would like to make about it as well, not just literally noting the report. So Mark Lambert is here, the Design, Sustainability and Infrastructure Manager. Welcome. Supported by Sam Taylor, who is our Climate Emergency Project Manager for technical things, I understand. So, Councillor Rattigan, you are poised. Does that mean you would like to do an introduction?
I'm grateful, Chair. I'd just like to endorse the words on the front of the foreword from my councillor, portfolio holder for the natural environment and climate improvement. I think we lay out very clearly that our priority when we changed the portfolios earlier this year, that we believe that we can, within this borough, within this council, and certainly within the administration, improve the world that we live in. And obviously that climate change ambition that we have by 2025 and the air quality strategy that supports it are vital to us, and we prioritise it. The fact that we have allocated money to our green agenda meant that we could legitimately say we are at the forefront of it. Now, are we going to get it all right? No, we're not. We need systemic change from ourselves as a borough council, but also our residents, our businesses, people who interact with us and just travel through us on the main arteries that link north and south, the A34, the M3. These are arterial roads which will not change the air quality until we reduce the number of diesel polluting cars, and we ensure that the take-up of electric cars is better than it is. And, you know, I might be a cynic, but one would almost say that this petrol and diesel crisis in the last month has been stirred by Boris to make us change our habits. The fact that we won't have to queue up for our own electric seems okay. This is an important thing. It calls us to account each year and reminds us of where we are in that journey for ourselves. But we have great officers here who support us as the administration, and I'm grateful to them, not just for writing this, but for getting underneath the bonnet of both our strategy and to help us understand where we are, but also where we need to get to in achieving our goals. So that's been my introduction to this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rattigan. Mark.
Great, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Rattigan, for that introduction. I was just going to take you through the paper very briefly. I wasn't going to go into too much detail, but just to give you some headlines and some points to note. I think it's been mentioned previously this evening, COP26 starts in Glasgow, end of the month, very important conference, and I'm sure you've all seen the headlines coming out from the government over the past few days around policy changes that they hope to make. But I mean, more locally, as a Borough Council, we declared our emergency back in summer 2019, and as the Chair said, we adopted the strategy in March of this year. This is the first time we've come back to committee with our annual update, and we're looking to do that more regularly going forwards, perhaps every 3 to 4 months, to keep you informed, because we recognise it's really important that members have an awareness of what we're doing at the Borough and to help to guide where we go next. In terms of the emergency declaration, members will be aware that we've got 2 targets in the declaration. One is linked to our own emissions as an organisation, and that's to be carbon neutral by December 2025, so just over 4 years away. And then there's a borough-wide target to work towards being net zero by 2030. And that's a really, really ambitious target. To put it into context, the government's working towards 2050. So we're 20 years ahead of that in terms of what our aims are. We've got before you this evening the strategy itself and the update to it. And I just want to kind of highlight a few of the kind of key issues there. I think it's useful to set the scene in terms of our emissions. And if I can take you just to one point in the report, and that's on page 29 of the agenda, table 2 there. This sets out our emissions as a borough council and where we currently stand. And if you just look at the right-hand column there for 2021, I'll just take you through what this actually means. So the figure at the top of just under 2,400 is the level of emissions that we've emitted as a borough council during that calendar year. If you take into account the green spaces that we look after and manage, they absorb around 2,000 tonnes of carbon, which leaves us with a net position of just under 320 tonnes of carbon. Is something that we need to deal with and look to address going forwards. Putting it into context, and the column before that is for 1920, and you can see that there's a significant difference there. We've got a figure of 1,700 compared to 318, and so a big variation in year. Two main reasons for that really is that we moved to green electricity over the course of 2020, so that took away a fair chunk of our carbon emissions. But also, I'm sure you're all aware of the COVID implications and the fact we were using our buildings less intensively. Some of them were closed, and staff travelled fewer miles, and some of our operational vehicles didn't travel quite as far. So that explains why we've dropped to 320. And I think we recognise that figure will increase as we go forward and get back to a degree of normality. So I think the challenge is that we need to manage that figure down and work and take actions to ensure it doesn't increase significantly, such that we can achieve our overall 2025 target. Just moving on to section 4 of the report, this is the borough-wide target, and this is a much larger figure, and one where we have much less control over emissions, given our sphere of influence. If I just refer you to paragraph 4.4 there, this is the overall level of emissions for the borough, and I think what we're looking at there is a figure of about 840,000 tonnes of emissions for activities taking place in the borough, having excluded the M3 travelling through our patch. So there's a significant level of emissions there that we need to work hard to tackle. And I think the report focuses really on how we will tackle our own emissions and the actions we're taking to drive down emissions more widely in the borough. So thinking about some of our priority areas, I think what we're trying to do is really to focus on things like EV chargers, our transport strategy, and how we can start to drive these things down. But perhaps it's also useful just to look back on what we've achieved in the past year. We've introduced a number of electric vehicle charging points in the borough. So we've got a new charging hub in Feathers Yard. That's the first one in Hampshire. And we've recently introduced charging points in Overton and Whitchurch. So we're beginning to look outside of the town for EV provision. What we've also done more recently is look at some LED lighting in our car parks, which has helped to drive down emissions in that sense. And we'll continue to do so to look at other opportunities in that respect. EV charging, as Councillor Rattigan mentioned, is a key area of focus going forward. And we've identified 3 or 4 key areas where we want to be really moving forward. So EV chargers, we're now recognising that on-street provision for those without driveway is a real issue and something that we need to contend with. So we're working with Hampshire County Council and are hoping to identify some locations in Basingstoke where on-street parking is prevalent and to start to introduce chargers for those without access to private driveways. We recognise that our operational buildings that we manage in terms of our own portfolio, so Dean's Building, the Aquadrome, the Tadley Leisure Pool, for example, and some of our workshops and depots are things within our gift. So we have in Appendix 3 to the report a schedule of those buildings and how we look to tackle them going forwards in terms of first of all undertaking an energy audit and then moving forward with capital improvements once we've undertaken that audit to understand what measures we can introduce. We're working hard with the planning policy team in terms of local plan policies to ensure that when we publish a draft local plan next year that it contains robust and watertight policies in respect of climate change and sustainability, and that's something we'll be working on with the climate emergency map in coming weeks. And we're also developing a process for residents and community groups to understand what kind of changes they can make at home and in their local areas to affect change. So that's something that we're going to be publishing in the next week or two in advance of COP, and it's going to be effectively an online guide that people can use to take steps to reduce carbon at home. We've been developing these approaches with our low carbon energy forum, which I think a number of you have touched on this evening under the BASP umbrella, and we've also been working closely with the Basingstoke Transition Town, and we're grateful for their time and effort so far in supporting the work we're undertaking and helping us to develop the work areas in a bit more detail. We've also got a climate emergency map that I know some of the members of the committee generally are involved in. So they've helped to develop the work areas in a bit more detail. Just a couple of final kind of things to update you on. We're in a fortunate position in being able to recruit additional resource to work with us to drive forward the climate change agenda. So we look to recruit those individuals in the next few weeks. And recognising that we would like to take members on the journey, you would have received an email today from Democratic Services team, which went out to all members, inviting them to a climate change focused briefing session on the 29th of November, and we'd welcome you attending if you're available. Finally, just section 9 of the report outlines some of the other areas that we look to focus on in the future, such that we can develop a roadmap to deliver zero carbon in time. But I think, Chair, that was what I wanted to say at this point.
Thank you, Mark. That's a very comprehensive introduction. Thank you very much. Any questions for clarification to start off with? Councillor Poland.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, yeah, there you are.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask a technical question of you, if I may? On 1.3, you mentioned that the actual determination of the numbers are as a result of, sorry, I beg your pardon, 3.2, that these are based on energy consumption. These presumably are used as national figures, but how does that affect if you have people that are using solar panels, because by definition they are generating electricity in their house, but the saving of CO2 emissions are significant. So they're using electricity, but they're actually saving CO2. So on the face of it, they're actually doing more than their bit relative to getting down emissions.
Sam, thank you. If you could turn off your microphone, please, Councillor Poland.
Being a bit temperamental. So paragraph 3.2 you're referring to there, is it? Just to double check. So I guess that figure is actually just referring to our council emissions, but I get the point you make. So if you're using solar panels, then essentially you won't be importing as much electricity from the grid. So you have a much lower consumption, and that in itself will reduce your carbon footprint as a result of not needing to use that electricity in the first place. So that's generally the main benefit. Of course, the national grid itself profits from people exporting their renewable electricity to the grid. Has an overall effect of greening the grid. So government have a target of making whole grid renewable only by 2035, zero carbon. So it kind of contributes to that overall benefit. So the benefit of having solar panels is really about using less national grid electricity. For us, the council, in terms of the point here, is about how we're procuring, how we're buying the electricity. So although we have solar panels on a couple of our buildings, it's also about buying energy that we know is from a renewable energy source. I don't know if that's helped. To come back if you have.
Thank you, Sam. Would you like to follow up, Councillor Poland, or are you comfortable?
Well, sort of, Chair. The problem is that if you use national numbers for consumption, some of that consumption is actually being regenerated by renewables from individuals, either individual houses or businesses. So it can skew the numbers. You can make numbers what you want at the end of the day.
I think Sam, if I've understood it correctly, what we're talking about is is the numbers that are the numbers that we're given in the paper extrapolations based on a generic base, or because at the level of the granular detail where people have got houses, you know, if you've got a street with more houses than the average with solar panels, then you know data that's taken on an average may not be truly reflective. I think that's what we're getting at.
Yeah, so for us as a council, it's on actual figures on our actual consumption. So that's all all based on that. For the borough-wide emissions, that's based on government data that does account for overall consumption. There is a bit of a lag in that, I think, as we allude to in the paper, the way they calculate that. So it is based on there is data on actual consumption, and they assign a emissions factor, kind of how green is the electricity that we all use. So it's also based on actual data, albeit at a kind of, I'm sure there's some extrapolations, some assumptions made because they can't quite assume on every single property.
So I think what would be really helpful, Sam, if I could prevail on you, is to after the meeting to perhaps email us how that government data is generated, how it's based, you know, so that we can get a sense of how generic it is and how much it actually relates to the borough. Is that possible? Not to do it now, but to do it after the meeting, that would be really helpful. Thank you very much. If that's okay, Councillor Poland. Councillor Mamaleni.
Thank you, Chair. It is about 8.11, which says decarbonisation in the council operational property. So, officer, can you please give us a proportion of what is the proportion of council operational buildings versus the council owned buildings? So there are significant number of council owned buildings where I'm talking about the community centres, and they're all being. Are you treating them as a leased out, where the lease is 0%, where they don't pay anything, and they maintain the building? So, or these council operational buildings, do they cover the council these community centres as well, where the lease is 0?
Thank you.
The figures in here really just refer to the operational buildings, so it's the depots, the workshops, the offices, things where we pay the bills effectively and where we day-to-day operate and function in those buildings. So it wouldn't include the community centres, for example, that are out there in the rest of the borough.
Chair, if I may need to,
Yes.
so the question is, what is the proportion of council operational buildings versus the council owned buildings?
I haven't got that information available. So
If you could let us know after the meeting, I think that would be really helpful. And I think also it does lead to the question of, for particularly community centres and charitable sector, how will the borough be able to support them to move to more green solutions? Thank you.
I think that's something we're working on with our community team effectively, and I think we would like to use the community guides that's referred to in the report to help them to take forward green energy and improvements they wish to make in their community buildings. But again, we'd work through our community partners in that sense to deliver that.
Thank you. Councillor Rattigan.
Chair, if I can say, when we do upgrades, as in the Fieldgate Centre in Kings Square, we are always looking for the best, most suitable heating, the grey water collection, so as it can be used on the fields and on the play areas. We will always, when we do an upgrade, review it against our green credentials and make sure that any money spent is spent in a way that greens up that facility as and when we can.
Thank you, Councillor Rattigan. Is that okay, Councillor Mumley?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you,
Chair.
Councillor Testain.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted clarification in 3.2 of the green gas for the energy supplies, and I wanted to know whether or not that was the green gas that's come from natural gas, or what exactly that actually is, because obviously that's been evidence that some of these things aren't as green as you thought.
Thank you.
I understand that the green gas isn't quite as prevalent as green electricity supplies. So whilst we have a green tariff through our energy supplier, I understand that only around a proportion of that is actually green gas as termed. So the source of that is something that we can look into again for you, but it's certainly not 100% as is the case with electricity.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Stein. Councillor Waldridge?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. The first one, if I can refer you to section 6.3, and you mentioned there about the, sort of the procurement team and providing guidance on processes and stressing the importance and possibility of including climate change considerations as part of quotation requests. I just wondered, is that not something that can be made mandatory, i.e. that you are going to be scoring, if you're putting tenders out, that you can score them on the fact that they have to be meeting carbon targets and considering these things rather than just advisory. So that's my first question. Thank you.
I think to some extent it will depend upon what's being procured, because obviously some may not have any green implications or carbon implications, but it's something that we would recommend those making purchase of goods and services take into account. Clearly it has to be balanced against the quality of the service that's being provided and the cost of that as well. So it's a key consideration amongst a few other points, but something that we are keen to push more and more going forwards, recognising the targets we've got to meet.
Thank you, Councillor Waldridge. As you say, you had two. Yes.
My other one's completely different, and it's. I'd like to say, firstly, thank you for the report. It's very encompassing and very thorough, so thank you for that. I meant to say that first. But my other question, and it may be me that's just missed it in the report, but I can't see anything that a target or a section that's referring to sort of training of, I suppose, future-proofing in terms of. We're all mindful that if gas boilers are going to be sort of going out, and I just wonder what we're doing in terms of linking in with the colleges, well, BCOT in particular, in terms of getting people training up young people who can sort of fit in heat pumps and things like that. It should be something we're looking at doing now, not in 3, 4, 5 years' time, because especially with new homes announced yesterday by the government that for any new homes from 2025, they won't be having gas boilers. We need to be getting people trained up now in this borough to be able to put in heat pumps. So I suppose that's my question. Thanks.
Yes, that's a really good point, and one that we're alive to. We speak regularly to the economic development team, who are looking to appoint a clean growth officer going forward. So they would have that crossover with the colleges to understand what skills and need to be in place, and how we can make sure that the education is there to provide those skills and training. So, yeah, it's something we've kind of got covered, I think.
Thank you very much, Margaret. You're happy there, Councillor? Yes.
If I can just add, Chair, it's something that we're also working on in terms of the construction skills agenda with our major partners like Urban and Civic, who we're very conscious will create a bow wave of demand as they start coming forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, that's reassuring. Thank you.
Councillor Ganesh?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. It's nice to see the progress and the action plan's been working. What I know it could be very short to sort of measure against the target that you set because of the COVID and a lot of things, and it's only about 6 months since we had up to date. But are there any sort of challenges that you come across with in terms of implementing the action plan? Because when it comes to green, I'm sure, I think Mark alluded earlier about the cost to procure some of those. So I'm sure there is a sort of an element of costs, and how do we pay for it? So do we have any sort of financial implication in terms of for the future, whether that can be considered as a borough council, as well as not just us, but the partners? So we are expecting partners to sort of procure more greener energy or products, but it could probably cost a little bit more than what they would probably get in a competitive market. So do we have any sort of a financial implication that we've considered, or do we have any sort of a plan to work around it? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark.
I think we recognise that often green solutions can have been in the past dearer than conventional solutions. If you look at vehicles, cars, for example, they tend to have a price premium attached to them. So I think we're mindful of that, and I think over time we'll begin to see the cost of technology begins to fall as electric cars, for example, become more widespread. There are various government grants out there, and we saw yesterday the announcement about the heat pumps and £5,000. So I think the government is alive to those kind of issues. It is a challenge, and certainly for us as a Borough Council in buying things and making investments, we need to be conscious of that. But I think in time it will become commonplace that the green solution is the best way forward. And we also need to think about whole life costs, I suppose, because often it might be more expensive to start with, but the payback ultimately gives you that scope to reduce running costs over time. So there's both those factors to consider.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Ganesh. As I just close the question bit, could I just ask a little bit about 9.8 low case, which is talking about providing grant funding to support local small and medium-sized businesses to reduce their emissions, which I realise is only just off the ground, literally September I think it started, but is it possible to tell us a little bit about how this can support businesses? What can they do with it? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, happy to. So this is a Kent County Council coordinated scheme they've been running for a couple of years, and it has kind of two elements. So the first is supporting any SME to improve their energy efficiency. So that might be procuring more energy efficient plant. Some examples that they've used in the past are things like breweries getting new brewing equipment that will save them energy, or could be improvements to buildings. And the other half, other chunk is businesses that are in a kind of low carbon sector, and supporting them to grow their business, to launch new products, promote themselves as well. So it's kind of the twofold. So existing businesses and kind of saving money and saving energy, but also promoting their low carbon energy.
Okay, thank you. So there's presumably more information about this on our website, is there?
Imminently.
Okay.
Imminently,
yeah. Sorry.
There's been a few delays to the launch of the scheme and receipt of information. It's a much funded scheme as well, so it's not pure grant funding to businesses. They have to stump up some money as well.
Okay.
But we are looking to promote that across our business channels.
Be very interesting. Okay, thank you very much. So if we could move to just general debate, if folk would like to make some comments about this paper. Thank you, Councillor Phillimore.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, I do note the content of the report and appreciate the work that's gone into it. But what we do as a council is a good example to follow, but only scratches the surface, really. I mean, the leaders mentioned national politics. We need the infrastructure in place. It's only good having the odd charging point here and there when you've got blocks of flats, estates where you've got no access to anything that looks like electricity. The fact is that electric cars are prohibited by cost. We need a change in housing development standards where we get people to install at build rather than the cost of converting. The heat pump initiative that's been mentioned by Mark is prohibitive to certain levels of the residents. And the last point really is, if we want to take more cars off the road, we need better public transport. And this administration has a record of cutting bus services.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Phillimore. Anybody else want to make any comments? Yeah. Councillor Gaskell?
You go first.
Sorry.
Just a general comment, and I don't know if it should be targeted at you guys, but there was an announcement for changing gas boilers. We have a lot of rural villages where there is no gas and they use oil. Oil burns more than, it burns dirtier than gas. Is there any provision for those people?
Sam?
I can quickly speak to the new government heat and building strategy that came out yesterday. I haven't read all 200 pages quite yet, but the government have labelled those areas as kind of no regrets. So as we talked about, a phase out of gas is talked about and planned in there, whereas properties that aren't on the gas grid already, as you say, that kind of potentially higher carbon emitting fuels are a lower regret option to look at alternatives. I think for us as a council and a team, it's about maximising the use of government policy, of direction of schemes and grants that exist, promoting those where we can to residents, and yeah, kind of building off the back of those. So, as you say, kind of treating all properties as the same is not the right approach, and we'll need to target rural as well as urban properties slightly differently.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Poland, you both put your hands up at the same time, so thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Picking up partly on what Councillor Waldridge made, this is a valid point about having people to do the heat pumps, and I'm a great fan of heat pumps, having one myself. And I'm not sure, we've got Ruth Ormela here, so she may know the answer, hopefully. We, certainly on the planning applications I've seen, there is an insistence on an EV charging point for new builds. There are, of course, under the building regulations, more stringent requirements now for insulation, etc. Are we able to insist on any new builds or conversions, for that matter, to have a different form of heating than gas?
Thank you. Who would like to answer that, Mark?
At this stage, I think because we currently determine the applications in line with the adopted local plan, we're not able to do so until building regs change in that sense. We are, at the moment, preparing a new suite of policies to go in the local plan update. So we're working hard with the planning policy team there to ensure that the policies are as robust as they can be, to move away from carbon-intensive forms of heating and lighting and power for homes. So that's something that we'll be bringing back as part of the local plan update to EPH committee in time, and obviously working with the climate emergency map to explore as well in a bit more detail.
Thank you. Any comments for that, Councillor Poland? Yeah? Is that okay? Yes, thanks. Councillor Waldridge.
Thank you. What I'd like to say is it's really nice to see sort of cycling in sort of in here in terms of the transport sort of proposals and everything, and the fact the work that's been done with Hampshire. But what I'd really like to see is more inclusivity with regard to cycling, because it's it's great to finally see a strategy for cycling, and hopefully some of the cycling routes improve in the coming year or two. But what I'd really also like to see some targets there for the many people in the borough who can't afford bikes for their kids, and who so don't have the opportunity to cycle. So maybe things like Basingstoke bikes. Let's get some bikes that people can go and hire at a very low rate, so people can go and use them to get used to the idea of cycling in the borough and get the confidence. Let's bring in some free cycling proficiency courses in schools, and going around the schools and getting our children all sort of into cycling, keen cyclists, and able to cycle safely. So it's practical stuff like that I'd really like to see, and some targets around that. It doesn't need to be expensive, but I think it needs to be there to go hand in hand with the cycling strategy, and be particularly aimed at those many young people and children in the borough who can't afford bikes and who can't afford to cycle. So that's what I'd like to say in particular. Thank you.
Councillor Waldridge. Councillor Ratton.
Councillor Waldridge, just to confirm, I spoke to a developer today, and that was one of the things I suggested. If they're selling houses to people, why aren't they selling them bikes as an addition in their garages? So that has been taken up, and one of the things they said, then we can extend it to a cycle proficiency at that site. So you are of the time, let me tell you. Well done, and today's the day, so well done.
Thank you, Councillor Waldridge.
Is that one developer though, or is that something that's going to happen across the borough? Because if it's just on one development in a rural area, that isn't hitting the people in the town that really need it. So that's my follow-up question to you there.
I'm delighted to say that we will be having a developers forum in early December, which is being set up by Ruth Ormela to make sure that the best of the ideas that we have for greening our developments within the borough are brought forward, and I'm absolutely convinced something like that will be on the agenda when we speak to them, and certainly if it isn't, I will be bringing it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rattigan. Councillor Jeans?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to follow up on the education side of what was discussed earlier. I know one of my colleagues mentioned introduction of education in colleges, but actually what we've got here in the borough are scores of people who are heating engineers who have spent many years training. What can we do as a borough to support additional education of heating engineers to be able to support the influx of requirement of new heating supplies? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think I understand that BCOT are looking at reskilling opportunities and what kind of skills are needed going forward to take forward new kind of initiatives. So I think that's what they're actively looking at. And obviously there's a crossover between the work that we do and the economic development team and the growth agenda that Ian mentioned earlier in that sense. So we're working hand in hand in that sense and kind of alive to those kind of issues.
And just to follow up.
Sorry,
just to follow up on that, will we be able to support in any way financially?
Our role is to be a facilitator, to encourage through what we lay out in our planning world, or the requirements. It is not our job to provide that education. That educational piece will flow from the needs of our economy. And just yesterday, the fact that there will be a replacement of boilers has also obviously automatically made people think about what training is required, what reskilling is required, what additional needs would be for current gas boiler contractors to switch over to ground source heating and that way of heating homes. So I think over the next few years, people will adapt what they do to take advantage of the opportunities that will be out there.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rattigan. Is that okay, Councillor Jeans? Yeah, lovely. Councillor Tisdale.
Thank you, Chair. We've talked a lot about the development for new buildings and things. What are we doing to encourage our partners in, for example, the housing associations to ensure a high level of possible retrofitting and decent insulation and making sure all that's happening? Thank you.
It's probably just as easy, Councillor, to refer you to page 33 of the report. We've got a section in the table there that talks around the steps that the housing associations have been taking, and we continue to work with them to explore opportunities to improve insulation and home heating systems. So we are working closely with our key partners in that sense. We've also been working on a Green Homes Grant Local Authority scheme, which is referred to paragraph 7.9 and 7.10. So this is an area where we've, by the end of the year, we expect to have helped 23 households to improve their kind of home insulation and heating in that sense. So that's using government grant direct, I suppose, and we've got a role in promoting that and ensuring it's available to our residents.
Thank you. The issue, I think, was more in that bit. It doesn't really talk about checking that they are making sure everything's insulated properly and they're doing their bit. Is there anything that can be done on that side of things, or is that just a step too far?
Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you for the question. Obviously, you are probably aware that there will be large-scale redevelopment of our large housing association schemes in Winklebury, South Ham and Buckskin, and I would expect them to bring forward clear and measurable incentives and targets for the greenness of the changes that they're going to make within these estates. And I look forward to that work, and of course your scrutiny of what comes forward in those proposals. I'm sure that you will be diligent in making sure that they are held to account. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just going to say, Popley.
I'm sure as all of the housing associations realise that for the betterment of the individuals living in those accommodation, they need to green every piece, I'm sorry I did not mention properly, but I will recover from that at some other point.
Thank you very much, Councillor Disdain and Councillor Rattigan. Okay, I think we've concluded our comments and questions, so thank you very much. That was a very rich debate. It's an excellent paper. Thank you very much, Daniel and Sam. I think what we've heard is from the report a lot of progress, but it's the beginning. I mean, I think we all accept it's the beginning. I think what we've heard is how important partnership working is across both our voluntary sector with our partnerships like the BTN and Hampshire County Council, many others, education, lots of partnership working, and it's how we influence and inspire people, I think, is important, and that makes our comms and promotion really important across with our partners and public and our residents. I think we've had some really excellent comments about how actually a lot of it is about affordability, and I think some of our councillors have made those points really well, that for some sections of our community, buying electric cars, changing our heating systems, those things are going to be a real challenge. So I think that was really helpful. Lots of practical suggestions, which is good, and I think very pertinent about training and shaping our workforce moving forward. So I think there's been lots of very helpful comments. I think there were two areas where we'll come back later. One was around the explanation of how the electricity consumption is calculated. I probably got the wrong words there, but you know better than me. And around the proportion of buildings we operate compared to what we lease, I think were the two things. So we're being asked as a committee to note the contents of this report and the appendices, including the actions underway in those proposed, and I assume that we are comfortable to do that. So yeah, got nods. So thank you very much. Thank you for coming this evening. Thank you. Okay, so we now move to item 7, the fireworks noise, reducing impact on animals and vulnerable people. So this is come to CEP following a motion in council in December 2020. The recommendation to the committee is to note the contents of the report and to consider the recommendations presented in section 12. We welcome Councillor Eachus and who is the Cabinet Member for Recycling, Waste and Regulatory Services, and Darren Chant, who's the Environmental Health Team. Oh no, sorry, I got Chris Williams, sorry. And you've got Interim Regulatory Services Manager. Lovely. So thank you very much. Councillor Eachus, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to give a brief introduction, as you say, this is a report that's been brought forward to the committee following the motion that went to Council in December 2020. It's obviously quite a detailed report detailing the issues for the committee to consider, and I think it's worth noting that I'm an animal lover and we want to do this stuff and we want to reduce the impact on animals and also vulnerable people, but it's also appreciating some of the limited powers that we've got. But I think paragraph 12 of the report very clearly sets out the things we can do, and I'm sure you all agree that we should be getting on and doing them. Comms are working on things at the moment because we're fast approaching bonfire night, and in discussions with officers in putting this paper together, I think it becomes quite clear that those bigger events that happen very rarely and around certain festivals and a few times a year, because they are well organised, residents are given a lot of notice, we can do more work with our comms team to advertise them so people can take steps to reduce the impact on animals and vulnerable people. The issues tend to come when there's people just letting fireworks off randomly in a back garden that isn't expected by neighbours or others in the community, and they're harder to police. But we can do what we can to manage that and comms the effects that it has. And as I say in the report at paragraph 12, to write to government around lower noise fireworks. But I think and hope that you would all accept that we're doing all we can and that we're happy to progress and do the things that are suggested in paragraph 12 to move things forward a bit.
Thank you, Councillor Eachus. Chris, would you like to present your papers? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's worth looking at the four strands to why this was brought forward. These are largely the same as what the RSPCA recommends. The first being that we request all public firework displays within the local authority boundaries are advertised in advance. That's very sensible. Just to provide some kind of background, so there's only one this year that we're aware of. That's in Hatch Warren. It is a large one, but as we mentioned, there is some acceptance of these. People can plan for them. They can bring animals inside. They can walk dogs earlier, etc. They can work around it. So I think there is some. Going on to the next point about public awareness, there's certainly some work we can do around other, probably lesser well-known holidays like Diwali and Chinese New Year, for instance. A lot of people might not know when they are. So by upping our comms around those sorts of times of year, we can certainly make people aware, and also make people aware of the impact they might be having with these sorts of events. Right into government, I won't cover that again. That's a fairly quick and easy way to make our points known. But again, the government, there's no kind of noise from the government, pardon the pun, that they're looking to change this anytime soon. And the last point, again, something we've got very limited sort of involvement in, and that's to ask the suppliers to stop quieter fireworks. It's worth noting that a lot of the bigger hitters, the supermarkets, do that now. Tesco, Morrison's, as they all do stop lower noise fireworks. Sainsbury's have stopped selling fireworks altogether. We have written to Fading Standards and asked that they, because they're all licensed, these people, they've actually got the list of these stockists, and asked that they use that information to target them and request that they at least stock lower noise fireworks as an option. They have come back to us and said they're considering that, but they haven't actually confirmed they'll be doing that yet. If we go on to the conclusions, I think we've covered a lot of those there. With regards to enforcement powers, it's difficult. They're short term a lot of the time. Even the ones that are in back gardens, they 15-20 minutes max, it's finished. We've only really got powers for persistent offenders. So the only thing the report makes reference to, the only kind of thing that I can think of that we might be able to get involved with is, say, a wedding venue that was happening every other weekend during the summer to celebrate weddings. We might have some involvement there. Other than that, it's going to be very difficult. We've only had 2 complaints of fireworks in the last 3 years as an environmental health team here at the council. Yeah, and the only other idea we could do is, if we get notified of fireworks, they're going to be through our licensing team. There'll be some kind of wedding or an event that's specified there'll be fireworks. We can recommend that these steps in Appendix A and B are taken on board. We can ask that local people in the locality are well briefed, because I think if you can prepare for it with your animals, etc., it will go somewhere to mitigating that. Yeah, and I think that's covered all the points. So any questions, happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Chris. So do we have any questions for clarity before we come to comment? Everybody comfortable with what they've read? Yep. Councillor Poden?
I think in general terms it's quite a good idea, clearly for animals that are left out in the field who can't be taken in and are subject to whiz bangs and whatever. But I'm sure you're aware that this motion was taken to the government last year, 2020, and was turned down. There was a proposal to restrict fireworks to a lower decibel. So I wonder what chance there would be of us achieving that. And the other thing is, I actually did some research. It was quite interesting that a school dance actually makes between 101 and 105 decibels. I'm not quite sure what decibels. I know you're talking about a 90 decibel, but what decibel does a lower noise firework make?
It isn't defined, a lower noise one. I think 90 is suggested in here, but there is no defined
definition of a lower noise firework. You're right. There's certain things that will be much louder. The average pop concert, for example, I think they start about 90 to 100 dB. I think the issue with fireworks is the fact that as all of a sudden, it's a loud bang and then it stops, and then there's no rhyme or reason to when they're going to happen, and it's that surprise nature that can be the issue, especially with animals and people perhaps dealing with PTSD and the like. So I don't think there is a legally defined limit for the decibel. With regards to your comment about the government, yeah, it's a good point. I really don't know if it would help, but
every little counts.
Yeah,
as they
I guess
say.
so. And I guess if more councils do come on board with this campaign, a weight of opinion might help.
Thank you, Councillor Poland. Do you have a follow up? Were you happy with that?
Well, I think, there's a big event this year. It's been cancelled by a mayor anyway, so that will reduce the noise pollution, won't it?
Okay. Any other points for clarification? Yes, or comment, actually. I think we've moved on. Sorry. Any more comments? Thank Councillor Rose.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is it possible to just put something on the council website to ask people to keep their firework displays, their household ones, to the weekend? Because this one is not so bad. It's a Friday, but inevitably there'll be parties on the Saturday as well. The bad years are when it's on a Wednesday, when the firework parties continue from one weekend through to the following weekend. I know most people, they'll have the party anyway, they'll ignore it. But if nudge theory has anything in it, then just asking people might persuade a few. And as has been said, every little helps. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we certainly updated our website with some more information on this. That was done in the last couple of weeks. That's all out there. And yeah, I take your point on board. I'll ask our comms here that can be included in any messages.
Chris, if I could ask a question of on 410, where it talks about control over the licensing and retail sale of fireworks rests with Hampshire County Council. It isn't in our recommendations to ask them to change their licensing to say they'll only accept low noise. Have they got the ability to do that? Do they have to follow the national, or could we ask them to change their policy?
I don't know. I would hazard a guess that they can't, but I can certainly find it out.
Would you mind finding out? Because I think it might be an action that we could consider. I know you've got in your recommendations to contact its firework retailers and Hampshire's to draw their attention to the benefits of low noise, but I just wondered if it was possible to also add asking them to think about whether mandating it.
That's fine. We're waiting for a response from them so we can take that up when they come back to us.
Thank you. Councillor Edris, did you wish to speak?
No, it's fine. I discussed it briefly previously with officers, and I think what we can do is ask them to consider that they encourage people to, or at least encourage people for low noise fireworks, and like we have, give the option for it, but I'm not sure they can actually force people. But what we could ask them to do, and I think we are as part of this process, is asking them to get on board with the campaign and encourage it, because some people don't know that lower noise fireworks exist. So if Hampshire can just give that option, they're not then mandating it, but they're on board with giving that information.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Compton-Burnett.
I think that one of the problems we've alluded to earlier is that they can go on and on. So one of the key things that came up on Facebook was, it's fireworks day then, and then it's again, and then, we're into, what was the next thing? I think it was Diwali, and it's day after day after day. And there are lots of religious festivals, which is fantastic. And I wondered whether we could engage with, as Aaron is part of the Interfaith Forum and the Multicultural Association, and maybe just talk to some of the religious leaders and encourage them to talk to the people of their religion. Diwali, for example, could we have the fireworks on a particular day? So could all of the Hindus be encouraged in Basingstoke to celebrate with fireworks on a particular day? So it doesn't just seem to be an endless stream.
Thank you.
Yeah, take that on board, and it's certainly something we can discuss with the comms team as to how we would comms that and get people on board with that. So definitely take that away, that point.
Thank you. Councillor Ganesh.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. which is really good because it's about the right time. We've been discussing on Facebook groups and all the community pages about this particular issue. I think we don't want to be the councillors or the council to say you cannot have a fireworks, because which is not something that we can do or sort of a mandate, but we can only mitigate. As someone who lives right next to a big park, I do hear a lot around, it could be Bonfire Night or Diwali or any sort of a festival, but it's nice to see that you've come across or you have explored all the communications options. But great to see the comments around how do we work with community leaders, and can we have some sort of a comms plan around this period of the year to have a bit more proactive and promote more around low decibel fireworks, or restrict particular days, for example, like if it was on a Friday, Saturday, and please be aware of all, just not the animals, about the people with PTSDs and who served in the armed forces and all, or someone who grew up in war-torn areas. So we have to be a bit more cautious around, and we need to communicate more. Can we have some sort of a comms plan around it in this particular period of the year?
No, there absolutely is a plan, and hopefully that comes across in the report. And they've been doing a lot of work at the moment. As Chris said, the website's recently been updated. There'll be a lot more ongoing updates as we lead up to firework night. So there's absolutely a plan there, and the comms team are on top of that, and they'll absolutely be taking away some of the comments from this evening. But it's like you said at the start, it's getting that balance right, because we don't want to ruin the enjoyment, but we want people to be sensible. And so absolutely the plan's there, and we'll just make sure that these points are all taken on board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Testain.
Thanks, Chair. One of the problems that we have in our locality, and I think Councillor Ganesh may have just hinted at it, is the antisocial firework displays on public land, which also leaves a lot of litter. Are we engaging with the community police or even the police and including that in the comms plans to make sure people know what to do if they think there's unauthorised and potentially dangerous firework displays and behaviours going on?
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, you're 100% right. It does rest with the police, those types of issues. We haven't actively engaged with the police to ask them. I'm sure they're well aware. I'm sure they do get lots of these reports. Just in their defence, these things tend to be very short-lived, and I imagine once they're out there, people are going to have a scatter and they're gone, or it's all done. So it's incredibly hard. And I'm certainly our CSPOs here. I'm aware they up their patrols around this time of year as well. But you know, even if you catch someone, it's what you do next. You know, if they're underage, it's a really tough situation. I think the police are kind of similar to us in that unless it's happening regularly in the same sort of place, they've really not got much of a chance of stopping these sort of ad hoc ones that are the real problem.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Testain, do you wish to come back?
No, that's fine, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wooldridge?
Just very shortly to say thank you very much for the report. You know, it's taken a while to come, but it is very thorough and well written, and you know, sort of lays everything out in a very good way. So, and yeah, we look forward to all the things being implemented. So, thank you.
Okay, so if we can move to 12.3 onwards, it talks about the recommendations. Oh, sorry, did you want to speak? I'm sorry, Councillor Phillimore, I didn't pick you up, sorry. Please do speak. Thank you.
Well, for once, I'd like to endorse what Councillor Each has said, really. It's common sense should prevail. We shouldn't be legislating against this. I come from a generation where every estate had a firework bonfire and a firework display, and we've moved a long way as a society, and even this great council used to have its own firework display on the Memorial Park. I just think we don't want to be too much of a nanny state. We just shouldn't be legislating against anything like this. We should hoping that common sense would prevail.
Thank you, Councillor Phillimore. I absolutely agree. I think a lot of this is about communication, isn't it? It's about people who have fireworks in their gardens and their neighbours aren't aware, and suddenly there's bangs and crashes going on. I think most of the public displays people know about because they're advertised by their nature. So I think it is about awareness raising as much as anything, isn't it? Which is what I think Chris's report and Councillor Eachers is saying. We want people to enjoy themselves, but be considerate of others at the same time. So if it's possible to have a look at the recommendations, they're kind of buried in section 12, but I think there were 4 really. So the first one is the latter half of 12.3. So the council, so rather than it saying could, it would be nice if it should or will encourage providers of public firework displays notified through the council safety advisory group process and through the licensing system to be advertised in advance of the event, allowing residents to take precautions for their animals and vulnerable people. Also used to promote low noise fireworks and raise awareness of the potential harm caused to animals and vulnerable people. I think we all agreed that that's a good recommendation. Yep. I'm going to presume, unless people say no, that these are acceptable. So the second one is 12.4, mostly I think, except for the last sentence. So the council should promote a public awareness campaign at relevant points in the year, particularly in the lead up to events where fireworks commonly feature, such as November the 5th, Diwali and New Year's Eve, about the impact of fireworks on animal health and vulnerable people, including the precautions that can be taken to mitigate the risks. So, yeah, everybody comfortable with that. 12.5 in its entirety, I think, is good. The portfolio holder should write to the government urging them to introduce legislation to maximise the maximum noise level of fireworks to 90 decibels for those sold to the public for private displays. Because, you know, I do note that that's his private display, so it means public ones could still have the louder ones. This would add to the representations already made by numerous local authorities in England and Wales. So, we know Councillor Poland's quite correct assumption that one council in itself probably won't make any difference, but for the volume could. Are we all comfortable with that then? Yep. And then 12.6, the beginning of the paragraph. So the council has already informed Hampshire County Council of the campaign and requested that it contacts firework retailers in Hampshire to draw their attention to the benefits of stocking low noise fireworks and asking them to promote the advice to the public about mitigating effects. So, and then we could advise retailers when we know which ones they are from the Hampshire County Council. So I think the only bit that I would add to that, that if it's possible for them to change their policies, it would be great if we could ask them to consider doing that. So we completed that agenda item. Is everybody comfortable with that? Thank you. Thank you very much. So thank you, Chris, for your report and for coming this evening. Thanks. I don't think so, unless you particularly want to stay. Oh, well, it is about recycling in flats. I think so. You'll slightly refocus it, yeah, if we can. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So if we move to item 8, the recommendations from the Task and Finish group, considering the council motion on recycling from flats and apartments. So with thanks to Ellie and to Councillor Wooldridge for taking away this task from the last meeting to write a report from the work that had been already completed. So what we're asked to do is to note this report and comment and endorse the recommendations of the Recycling from Flats and Apartments Task and Finish group. And just to be clear that those recommendations include the proposal to reform, if you like, a similar Task and Finish group with a slightly repurposed purpose. Councillor Wooldridge, would you like to introduce this report for us?
I'll say a few words.
Thank you.
I haven't prepared anything particular, but basically, after the last CEP, Ellie kindly got the officers to produce a summary of the work that had been sort of completed so far, and it was quite clear that because of COVID, I remember going to the last Task and Finish group on this, which was just before COVID, I think, started, and they were making excellent progress in that they had a plan in place as to how they were going to implement an improved sort of signage system in all the flatted developments. So it's improved stickers on the bins, and which they were trialling it in about 2 or 3 areas, including Chapelgate, which is where I'm a councillor, and I saw it being implemented there, and it was working well, and they had a programme in place to sort of roll that out throughout the borough. But what was quite clear when the information came through that Ellie managed to get from the officers for me to do this report was that unfortunately, because of COVID primarily, it came to pretty much an end soon then, and it hasn't really sort of got back on track really, and it's only starting to do so now. I mean, because of that, my feelings very much were, although despite the good progress, then we haven't finished the task in hand. We still it's only really touched on a few of the flooded areas. So we want to see that implemented throughout the borough's flooded developments, and also we want to monitor it. We want to make sure it works as well. So that was why I was hesitant to just completely disband the task and finish group. So in liaison with Councillor Vaux, I think we both agreed that it would be better to convene it, and we both discussed other things that could be added to it. In particular, the fact that the Bringbank sites are closing, and because of that, that's going to sort of disadvantage people who are living in flatted developments, because they're not going to have the same facility to get an extra bin to put the extra recycling in. So we were mindful that that needs to be monitored as well, the impact of that, and how that could be dealt with. So we thought that would be another thing that the reconvene group could look at. And then Councillor Vaux suggested that with the more flatted developments coming on board, we might want to have something looking at the space of communal bin areas to make sure that they do meet these criteria as well. So I think between us, that's what we came up with. So because of that, we would like to reconvene it. One thing we haven't discussed is whether we use the existing membership or whether we get brand new members on board. And I think we're probably both open to either of those. I don't know. I don't want to speak for you. So that's it really. So I suppose what we're asking tonight is that you agree in principle that we reconvene it, and then I will leave it to you to decide how we do it. So,
okay,
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Woodridge. I think the other element to factor in was being mindful of the Environment Act coming up, and I think there's another act of recycle and waste something or other, which might mean that we're expected to collect a lot more recycling, and we were thinking, well, how are we going to manage that in flats? So there were so that was basically the focus, I think, is to think about the impact of what's already been done, and then to think about the future for the next couple of years, how we might make sure that there is sufficient capacity and capability for people to recycle things in flats. I think that's, in a nutshell, is what we're looking at. So do members have any questions about what's happened already before we look at the recommendation going forward? Any questions about what's already happened in this task and finish group? Councillor Jeans?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, obviously, I can see that the focus has identified the Skyline Plaza and Crown Heights. Obviously, Councillor Nolanani and I are councillors for that area. Just to say that we would be really happy to, sorry, I was speaking for you, Aaron. We'd be really happy to do what we can to support our residents in that area with more recycling campaigns.
Yes, thank you, Councillor James. I think a lot of the reason why we focused in there is that we felt that there wasn't adequate. It was felt there wasn't adequate recycling space there, and residents were looking for support to help. There was a lot of fly tipping and dumping in their household waste areas and things. So it was about helping residents to manage that. But thank you for your support with that. Any other comments about the report now? Councillor Poland?
Okay, can I just thank Councillor Woodridge for what she's written and done, because this is a subject close to my heart. And I don't know about the Basingstoke flat area. I have to show my ignorance, but I know where my business is in another town, not a million miles away from here, or half an hour away. And I lived in a couple of flats before I bought my house, and I couldn't ever understand why, and maybe there isn't a simple answer, as to why a large number of people in those flats, which were privately owned, they weren't local authority ones, frankly didn't care about recycling at all. And there were massive bins provided. It was just appalling. And it does seem, I don't know whether it's the same in the borough, but it did seem to me that that transitory population, frankly, paid lip service to recycling, whereas maybe you and I and other councillors, I suspect, do not. And I'm not sure that I have the answer on whether the councillor does.
One of the things that the officers attached to the previous task and finish group were looking at was why that was and the barriers around that. And I think one of the things that they came up with is the fact that often these are managed by management companies. They provide the information leaflets to the management companies, but they don't necessarily pass them on. So there was that sort of barrier. So I think that's why they went down the route of having improved signage on the bins and on the walls of the communal areas, just so that residents, they might not get it from the management agencies, but or even in some cases the housing associations, but at least they will have it in the storage areas. And I think that was kind of how they got to that conclusion. But it's a very good point. I think in those areas it is a very transitory population, and if recycling, people don't know how to recycle. I think it is ignorance is part of it. Well, not ignorance, but lack of knowledge of what they need to do. So and it'd be great to have you on board the thing. So yeah. Thanks.
If I could also point out that there is a cost to clearing up communal areas. I went out with Serco, and it's quite a significant additional burden that they carry when they have to go to communal flat areas where people have dumped their household waste and recycling, and those costs are usually picked up by the management company or the housing association or whatever, and sometimes that's when it's a commercial property. That's the way to try and change behaviours is to actually pass the cost on to the residents. But yeah.
I think that is an absolutely valid point. I think sometimes they are unfairly as well passed on, because it sometimes isn't the residents' fault that recycling has it turned into just a dumped area, because it maybe that for whatever reason that area's been missed for collection, so the bins are full, so then residents start dumping it, put sacks down, and then residents who are unaware will go and add to it, and suddenly everybody's going to be charged for something which might be due to a missed failure. So it's a very, very difficult and emotive subject, really. Yeah, but quite often it's people living in the flat developments with the least amount of money who get the penalty, and it's not fair. So.
Okay, Councillor Maloney.
Thank you, Chair. And looking at the 2.1 on this one, so it has identified only 3 sites in the entire. In 2.1, it identified only 3 sites in the flats one, right? In the council road, I'm talking about opposite to the which one? That hotel.
I'll be honest, I'm not sure which one at all. I'm aware of which of the which ones in Chapelgate. There's several sort of blocks of flats in Chapelgate, and I'm aware which ones were used as a pilot there, because I had a keen interest in that, but I wasn't, because Crown Heights and Skyline Plaza aren't my ward. I didn't pay too much attention on that. I do apologise. But if you contact the officers, I'm sure they will tell you, and they'll give you information about how that went. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ganesh.
Thank you, Chair. I just would like to add thanks for the report. It's really good. It's because it's some issue, something very close to my heart, and we do a lot of communal clear up around Marnell Park and Popley, Sherborne Fields, and unfortunately, this is, like you explained earlier, this is down to various stakeholders like management agents, to builders, to the developer, to residents associations. It goes on, and it's in most the cost of it are picked up unfairly on residents who aren't responsible for this, which is something that very, very unfortunate and very hard to tackle. And I think we need to get to the bottom of it, and we might have to work more with resident associations and the parties involved to tackle this. I'm sure there are lots of the community groups working locally to tackle this, and all I can say is thank you so much. I'm sure we, as a committee, we can probably look into this further in future and come up with possible or suitable solutions, or at least seek for some sort of solutions in future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Phillimore.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Carolyn. Appreciate I'm only a sub, so I might have missed some stuff. Did we find any differential between perhaps housing association sites where residents are allocated housing to permitted development sites, where a lot of those are just buy-to-let landlords who let them out and haven't got so much care? And as you know, one of the permitted development sites, which was Barclays Mercantile, we didn't even provide bin saw in the first place, which is a massive development.
I'm not an expert on the detail of this, and I do apologise for that. I'm just going on the information provided by officers, but what I can comment from my own personal perspective. I think, remembering what the officers said, it was very much a mixed bag. I think the main issues were not with housing associations, or there were some problems with some, I think, but a lot of them, and certainly Chapelgate was one case in hand, because that's how I particularly got involved and got that on the pilot, because I had repeated problems down there, and that's a housing association. But I think remembering what the officers said, a lot of them were the managing agents, so the ones with remote private management agents who were just not hard to communicate with and hard to link in with. I'll be honest with you, I don't think permitted developments were raised, but I do think it ought to be included when we look at it again. And I think that's the whole point. Well, one of the main points we were saying, it hasn't been fully evaluated, monitored, and fully implemented, but certainly not monitored and evaluated. And I think that's one of the next things that we need to do and learn from it that way. So yeah, thanks, Colin.
Okay, thank you very much for answering lots of questions, Councillor Wildridge. No, you've done jolly well. As somebody that was on the group, you did jolly well. So with that in mind, the proposal on the table is that we reform and refocus the task and finish group to complete the work of the previous group, but also look at how we might be able to support future flatter developments in light of changes in brink banks, changes in legislation, etc. So are the committee supportive? Do they agree to supporting this? Could I have a proposer and a seconder? That'd be helpful to get it. Councillor Poland and Councillor Disdain. Thank you very much. And then I think personally we should reform the membership. I'm not saying that people that were there originally can't be included, but I think it would be helpful. But bearing in mind we have a changed committee and a lot of changes of councillors generally, I think it might be helpful to ask for members to volunteer to join this group. Do we have any from CEP that would like to join? And we'll also ask externally other councillors. Do we have anybody that would like to? Councillor Wooldridge, would you be interested? Yes. Councillor Disdain? Yeah. Anybody else?
I was just going to say I'm not a regular member of CEP now, so I'm quite happy to step back if somebody wants to take that position.
It depends, Councillor Gaskell. Would you like to continue with it or not? I don't mind.
I'm quite happy to drop back, but if you need people. Fine,
thank you. Anybody else? I think Councillor Jeans, would you? Yes. Not a CEP. Doesn't matter. Task and finish groups don't. It doesn't require you to be a member of CEP to be part of the task and finish group. It's about having the right people around in the group, really, Councillor Jeans, to add value to it. So, what we'll do if there are no other. Yes, Councillor Mills. If what we'll do is we will go out and ask if there are any other councillors that like to join in the wider council population. Is that right, Ellie? Is that the right approach?
I will write to the other councillors on there currently and make sure if they want to continue or not.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Sorry, Councillor Ganesh, I missed that.
I just added, no, we got to be more inclusive and have more men in there as well.
Okay. Okay, we'll remember that. Okay, thank you very much. That's great. So if we could move to item 9, which is our work programme. So we have at the moment, as people will be aware, we are having an additional meeting, I've lost it now, additional meeting in November to take the community delivery strategy, and we will also be taking a paper which comes from the full council meeting last week, the West Ham Leisure Park wider vision, which asked CEP to involve the public in the development of a wider vision and any specific new solutions. So we will be having that on the agenda as well.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes, Councillor Fillimore. Is there going to be a map on the
Leisure Park? I understood there was going to be a map on the Leisure Park.
Now that I don't know. I don't know if you know, Ian, whether there will be.
Happy to confirm that. I'll bring it back.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So December, we will have a paper on the review of the grass cutting this year. So members may be aware that this is also going to scrutiny in November. And unusually, I've asked that it also comes to CEP because we did ask for it in our July meeting. And scrutiny will focus on looking at what has happened and append comments to the report. And then it will come to CEP for us to look forward. Our mission is to support our officers and that service to make sure that next year it all goes swimmingly well. So that will come to December. And I also expect our long-awaited paper on the ice rink. The survey, I'm assured, will be with the Borough by the end of next week. As members know, we've been waiting for a Borough commissioned survey of the ice rink, pad and the building. It's been delayed for 3 months due to unforeseen high demand for specialist equipment and other things. So it is late and I'm very sorry about that, but I am assured that we will have it in December. The report needs to be assessed and recommendations go through the internal processes during November. So that's why it will come to us in December. The Borough has also met with Planet Ice to update them with the Borough's plans for the leisure centre following the joint decision between the Borough and New River to end the development agreement to regenerate the leisure park. So just wanted members to be aware that those discussions have started. Okay, so that's December. In January, we will have a paper on fly tipping, which Councillor Eachus did promise us at a previous meeting. And we will also be taking the cultural strategy, which sounds very interesting. And then March, at the moment, we just have a verbal update on climate change, etc. And just so members are aware, we are expecting in June CEP that there will be another climate change update as well. I think Mark Lambert mentioned when he presented the report that he was hoping to bring more regular reports to this committee. Yes, Councillor Tisdale.
Thanks, Chair. We obviously raised the issue of an ecological emergency at the last council meeting. I think that's something maybe we need to think about scheduling in.
Yes, thank you. I'll take that away. Thank you, Councillor Tisdale. The other things that we haven't yet timetabled are the future of the Anvil and Haymarket, and that we should next year probably have the community elements of the town centre strategy. Those aren't imminent. And we don't have the outcome of the Camrose planning appeal yet. So those things will be scheduled in at appropriate times. And I'm hoping to talk to Councillor Bound about the Anvil and Haymarket quite soon, because it is quite imminent. I think the lease ending on the Haymarket, I think it is. So we've got quite a lot on the agenda, and I hope the committee is comfortable with what's planned. Is that okay? Yeah, great. Thank you very much. So I think we don't have any confidential items, so I think we can call this meeting a close, having thanked Ellie very much for her support and Ian for coming this evening. Thank you all very much.